All right, we are live. For those of you who are watching on the replay, hello. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes or so, and if you click the timestamps on the right, you'll be able to see when I'll be getting to each topic in terms of current events. But for now, we'll just wait about 2 minutes or so, and then we'll get started with the live stream. So for those of you who are entering, as you can see in the comments, I let y'all know that there's a poll. I just want to see if your teachers have been covering the argument essay yet. And I just want to gauge where y'all are at. And once again, we'll start the stream at about 6:02 Central, 7:02 Eastern, 4:02 Pacific. Thanks for coming. Okay. I guess I'll get started with just the general stuff. If you aren't already, please go follow Fiveable on all of their social media. That includes Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. They post reminders on their Instagram stories and on their Twitter as to when streams are. And their YouTube channel has a pretty good collection of videos. Also, their Instagram has a lot of funny memes, so I highly recommend you check out their social media because it's pretty valuable. So, what is today's stream going to be about? We're actually going to go through first why current events matter and how they apply in AP English language. Then we'll move into 6 specific events. The first is Britain's exit from the European Union. The second is the recent impeachment inquiry against President Trump. The third is protests that are happening in Bolivia, Ecuador, and Chile. The fourth is Harvard and its affirmative action ruling. The fifth is Kurds and Syria, and the sixth is union strikes. And for those of you who are in the audience right now, if there are any current events you want to ask me about, or if you want me to discuss it, I'd be happy to. I sort of keep up with current events for the most part, and news literally went down today, for instance, about the Missouri abortion. What are those called? Abortion clinics. So news is changing every single day. But if you want me to discuss something that isn't on this slide, please let me know. Also, we have a bunch of fantastic streams that are going to be happening every single week. We're aiming for 2 streams every week. Most of them are on Tuesdays, although today we're having a current event stream just because it's the end of the month. So Stephanie Kirk is hosting a rhetorical analysis body paragraph stream at 7 p.m. Eastern. She'll basically be talking about what's really important to include and how to, in a body paragraph. And as you may or may not know, there is the 1-4-1 rubric, and your body paragraphs make up 2/3 of all of your rhetorical analysis score because you really have to include those evidence and commentary in those body paragraphs. The day after, I will be hosting a rhetorical analysis conclusion paragraphs at 7 p.m. Eastern on November 5th. I'll just be talking about how to wrap up a rhetorical analysis, and I'll also be doing a review of what's kind of already been taught in terms of the intros and the body paragraphs. And this, unfortunately, for those of you who have been to my previous current event streams, is the last monthly current event stream that I will be hosting alone for AP English Language. And if you're watching on a replay, just know that you will now be, if you're going to tune into a live stream for current events, I will now be joining the AP US government team to host a weekly current event stream at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time every single Monday. It's going to be a lot of fun. The first half of the stream is usually going to be dedicated to elections. One of my close friends and AP Gov streamers, Fatima Raja, she will be talking about elections. And then the last half is other current events. That is very, very similar to the format of what I'm doing in this stream today, which is discussing, geopolitical politics, and how it links to AP English language. The goal really is to merge the things that they're doing in AP government and the things we're doing here in AP English, and merge the audiences, and also really gain different perspectives on issues. Because as you can see, I am the only streamer here, but with AP Gov, you'll get, or with our AP English language and AP government collaboration, you'll get a bunch of different perspectives each week about the current events happening in our society. So the first thing that I'm going to cover is why current events matter. So you might be wondering, why am I here? Why do current events matter in AP English language? It's not like AP current events. The reason why current events matter, most importantly, is that they serve really well as support for the argument essay. Because remember, when you're writing your argument essay, you basically get a prompt that says, write an essay stating your position on this issue. So 2 years ago, it was about eminent domain, which is basically the government being able to take away private people's property. And last year, it was write about something that is overrated. So you can totally use current events in every single one of your argument essays, and they can also serve as your sophistication point. So if your AP Lang teachers have been teaching and reinforcing those new rubrics in class, you'll also know in that 141 that the last point is sophistication. The way you could earn sophistication with current events is by using contextualization. So basically putting your thesis in context by mentioning current events, or even doing a rebuttal and a concession, which means you're just kind of addressing the opposing point of view, and then you concede and you kind of argue against it. Also, you can use current events in a bunch of other ways. You can use it in the synthesis essay by providing context to a prompt, and you can even use it for practice. You can take a current event story and turn it into a prompt, and you'll practice writing theses. And that's the exact same thing we're basically going to be doing in today's stream. I'm just going to have you practice maybe writing a few theses here and there, and then we'll see how those go. Cool. So I'm just going to ask a general question. I'll give you about a minute to answer this in the chat. What are some current events that happened this month that you know about? I just want to see if you watch the news or if you know about things that have happened from October 1st to October 30th today. So just leave a comment and let me know what current events you know have happened this month. I also wanted to remind you that if you have any questions or any comments, concerns throughout the stream, just let me know in that comment box. Leave like a comment and be like, hey, can you re-explain something? I need help with this topic, and I'd be happy to answer it. So I guess I'll start with some current events I know happened this month. One current event I think that was really, really big was the Impeachment Inquiry. So as you may or may not know, there was this whole issue over the quid pro quo that the president allegedly conducted. He basically told the Ukrainian president, hey, I'm not going to give you military weapons unless you investigate my political opponent, Joe Biden. And we've now seen that the House, I believe, either today or tomorrow is voting officially to start an impeachment inquiry. It's just to get people's records to see if they support impeachment or support starting impeachment proceedings. All right, but we're first actually going to our first current event is actually going to be international based. It's Brexit, or Britain's exit from the European Union. So as you may or may not know, the current Prime Minister is Boris Johnson. He's in the bottom right corner there. And basically the reason why, there was a referendum in 2016 where the British people voted to leave the European Union. And what happened is that under the first Prime Minister, Theresa May, right after Brexit, that first prime minister, she was unable to get Britain to leave the EU because the UK Parliament just did not support any of her plans to leave. But Boris Johnson's new plan would keep Northern Ireland to tied to EU trade rules on food and other goods. There has to be a customs check, and Johnson basically assured that it would not be at the border and that there would not be any hard border. And so that's the thing, that's the difference between Theresa May and Boris Johnson's deal. That Boris basically did not have what was called the backstop, in which in a few years they were going to reconsider whether Northern Ireland would still be a part of the UK or would join Ireland, for instance. But now Boris Johnson kind of wants them to be more tied towards the EU. The unfortunate thing is that the Democratic Unionist Party, or the party that has 3 seats representing Northern Ireland, unfortunately does not support this deal. And that's problematic because currently Boris Johnson does not have a majority in the UK Parliament, and he's kind of just running a show on his own with independent lawmakers sitting on the government bench, but them not having an official majority. UK lawmakers have already decided to delay a vote on Johnson's Brexit deal. He had to ask for a 3-month Brextension, but it's actually known as a flextension because they want to exit the EU by January 31st. Basically, lawmakers approved the deal in principle, but they rejected the timeline because they said it was too quick. He wanted basically these lawmakers to review the deal in 4 days, and they were nah, that's way too fast. And as you can see in that last bullet point, Boris Johnson basically said, if you don't leave the EU in the next 2 weeks, by mid-November, we're going to call for an election. And as we speak right now, or a few hours ago at least, Britain was actually debating in Parliament when they would be holding an actual election. So it seems like it's probably going to be either December 9th or December 12th. And the reason why Boris Johnson is calling for an election is he's basically trying to either A, get more seats for the Conservative Party, or B, allow that new ruling party to basically deliver Brexit. And when I say deliver, it just means negotiate with the EU, sign the treaties, and get Britain out of the European Union. So there are a bunch of ways that Brexit can be applied on AP English language. It's a pretty important international event. And what we've actually seen is that because of Brexit, there's been a lot less economic trade with countries like Germany, which is the reason why Germany is actually shrinking in terms of their economy. And that's really bad because if Germany's economy is shrinking, they're the biggest economy in Europe, and it affects everyone else because everyone else also trades with Germany. And that's led to what's called an economic recession, which is almost like a depression, but a lot less worse. And it just leads to an economic downturn for a time period. Some other ways that you can apply Brexit is the mob mentality. So many people found issue with Brexit, which is why parties like the Labour Party have been advocating for what's called a second referendum that confirms whether or not they want to leave. Because all that was stated on the ballot was stay in the European Union or leave the European Union. 52% of people supported leaving. Also, there's the issue of misinformation because a lot of people said, oh, we're going to secure our borders. We're going to make sure that the UK is independent, yet that's not really happening with this whole deal where Northern Ireland is staying with the customs union. So, once again, we've seen politicians don't usually tell the truth. So as you can see here, we have 2 theses examples. The first is write an essay that argues your position on whether voting should be compulsory. And the second prompt is write an essay that argues your position on whether direct democracy is an effective form of government or an effective form of governing. So in this case, I'm not going to have you write a thesis to any of these. I know it's a Wednesday night. I get it. You don't really want to do a lot of work. But this is, I think we can use this kind of as a lesson to see how we can take a current event and basically convert it into an AP English language prompt, because I think it is pretty likely that you could get a compulsory voting prompt if they asked about things like eminent domain. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about Brexit? In about 20 seconds, I'll switch over to the next slide. Otherwise, you can ask me anything about Brexit because, it's a pretty small audience today, and I want to make this as interactive and engaging as possible because I don't want to be talking to a wall. It's a lot more boring when I do that. Cool. We'll move on to the next event. which is the impeachment inquiry. So as you can see in that top left picture from PBS NewsHour, we've seen that 86% of Democrats formally or agree with formally starting an impeachment inquiry into President Trump, and 88% disapprove of it. And nationally, we see that it's about 52 to 43. So there is a majority of Americans agreeing that there should be an investigation into whether or not President Trump should be impeached. And basically what's happened is that the House started an investigation. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, was like, hey, we're going to hold an impeachment inquiry. And then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who is a Republican, was like, hey, it says it's ingrained in the Constitution that we have to hold a trial and basically make sure that everything is like, we have to follow the Constitution. We can't be partisan. And it's when you make that kind of statement that there will be a trial in the Senate, it's like assumed that the House is going to vote to impeach. Also, we've seen that there was an alleged or confirmed quid pro quo between Ukraine and the United States, and how that materialized as President Trump released a transcript where he basically told the Ukrainian president, hey, I want military aid. And we've also seen multiple ambassadors who are Republican actually go against the president and say, hey, the president definitely asked for an investigation in exchange for military aid. The White House is saying that they are refusing to cooperate with the partisan impeachment inquiry. In fact, President Trump even called it a lynching, which led to a lot of tensions because, nothing can be worse than like the enslavement of an entire ethnic group. And so it was definitely inappropriate. Also, we've seen that key military leaders have been testifying most recently, and certain Republicans are calling them unpatriotic. Yet we've seen that internally within the Republican Party, certain Republicans have been like, hey, don't call people who served our country unpatriotic just because they aren't agreeing with our political stances. Also, one of the most important current events that has happened within the last week is that where testimony was happening with, I forgot her name, her last name's Cooper. There's this lady who worked in Ukraine. And what happened is that she was testifying, and House Republicans who were not on the committees, they basically could not hear testimony, because what's happening right now is private testimony. And basically it's committees of the House. So not all 400 whatever members, 435 I think, not all of them are sitting in and actually listening to testimony. It's just a select 50 people, a select 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans who are listening into these hearings. And so these House Republicans who aren't on the hearings, and featured right here, although that's covering it, is Matt Gaetz, who's kind of the leader of the House Republican group. They were like, oh, we're going to storm the testimony place, and they all walked in, a group of 40-something Democrat or Republicans walked into the sensitive compartmented information facility, otherwise known as SCIF, and they were like, we demand to know what's happening. This is a witch hunt. It's all happening in private. And key Republicans like Senator Lindsey Graham has been like, hey, during the Clinton and Nixon investigations, we saw that the president had a chance to defend themselves, and they had lawyers, and the opposition party. So in the case of Clinton, Republicans, and in the case of Nixon, Democrats, were able to subpoena, or basically, force people to come testify. And right now that's not happening because Nancy Pelosi is making sure that every individual witness is in a private hearing. And the reason as to why they're doing private hearings right now is because they do not want witnesses to copy other people's testimony. So the reason why hearings aren't public right now is because they're afraid that the next witness, who could be a Trump ally with the first witness, are just going to copy each other and mirror their stories. And they just want to make sure that everyone is telling the truth rather than trying to piece together a puzzle that sort of makes the president seem vindicated, or I don't know if vindicated is the right word. Basically they don't want to make a lined up story that helps the president and protects him. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about impeachment? There's also been news basically that Rick Perry is going to leave the administration by the end of the year. Allegedly, he was the one who told the president to call Ukraine, and now he's leaving. So we don't know what's really happening with that. Some people are suggesting that he's leaving to cooperate, but others are saying he just wants to go into another political position to escape kind of problematic issues. And also Mike Pence is allegedly involved. the president mentioned him at one of his like debriefs or whatnot, and so are many other key officials. All right, so there's a lot of application to impeachment, and it seems just like Democrats and Republicans fighting like they always do. But in this case, partisanship and polarization, in addition to political gridlock, these are all really good examples of the lack of productivity in politics and how politics doesn't really change anything, which is why I came up with the prompt: write an essay that argues your position on whether our politics are productive today. So I'm going to wait about a minute. I want you to write a thesis, and I'm sure you've done a lot of thesis writing if you're an AP Lang student and you're in this audience right now, in the chat right now. Please write just a one-sentence thesis arguing your position on whether our politics are productive today. And then I'll just read it out loud, and we'll talk about your thesis. We'll wait another like 30 seconds or so, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Cool, we'll move on. So the next current event is the protests in Bolivia, Ecuador, and Chile. So as you may or may not know, we're increasingly more involved in like our domestic politics, things like climate change that happened at the UN, gun rights, abortion, those key hot topic issues. But down in South America, we've seen that there's been a lot of democratic protests, or protests for democracy, excuse me. So for instance, in Bolivia, we saw that President Evo Morales ignored the 2016 referendum on term limits and campaign for a fourth term. He really focused on how he grew the economy of Bolivia, but a lot of people have been alleging corruption, including his own opponents, which led election officials most recently to stop sharing results for 24 hours all of a sudden. And then his opponent, Carlos Mesa, suddenly was down votes, and Morales was in a huge lead. And then people began to protest. There was also a state of emergency declared by President Morales, and he basically said he won. So he gave an acceptance speech, even though people were alleging corruption. Also in Ecuador, Lenin Moreno of Ecuador actually had to move his capital. So he had to move the government to a separate city, Guayaquil, because they ended what's called a fuel subsidy, which led to a spike in fuel prices. And that's really problematic because it led to transportation workers, young people, and indigenous groups not being able to afford gas. And that's what led to violent protests erupting, leading to street fights, Molotov cocktails, breaking into like businesses, things like that. And finally, in Chile, we saw a subway fare hike of 4%, leading to really higher ride costs. And the government actually repealed that subway fare hike, but protesters are still fighting right now because they're really angry about the cost of living going up in Chile, but things like the minimum wage still staying low and workers' rights not really being protected. So there's a lot of application to these protests. It's a really big example of democracy. So people standing up for themselves and fighting corruption. So it's all about that, you know, when a government is becoming tyrannic, you overthrow it, that kind of principle that comes from the Enlightenment thinking. If you are an APUSH, which many of you I think should be, because I took AP English Language as a junior. There's also that facade of democracy where it appears like a country's democratic, they're having elections, but it's not actually like material, like it's not really a democracy. They're just having votes for fun. So Here, write a thesis arguing your position on whether government accurately represents their citizens well. Another example of a prompt that you could potentially get, or a way where you could convert an event and turn it into a prompt. Cool. So let's have a real quick quiz in case you are paying attention. Just want to make sure y'all are alive, so please let me know if you are. So the first question is, when will Brexit occur? So I'll give you a hint. There's a 3-month flextension, and Brexit was supposed to originally happen on October 31st. So when will Brexit occur? The next question is, what did House Republicans enter with cell phones illegally? I forgot to mention, by the way, that when they stormed that room, they brought in cell phones, and they broke the law because you're not allowed to bring cell phones into that room. And finally, what country saw a fare hike triggering protests over social inequality and rising costs of living? So for those of you who are not currently on the stream and you are watching the replay, hello, you can just write these answers down, and I'll give you about 30 seconds, and then I'll tell you the answers just to make sure you've been paying attention. And don't go back, don't cheat. Also, cool, I saw in the poll that someone has been learning about the argument essay. That's amazing. Because I didn't start the argument essay until about January. Okay, I'll give you about 30 more seconds to answer these 3 questions, and then I'll let you know the answers. Okay, so the answer to the first question, when will Brexit occur? The deadline is January 31st, 3 months from October 31st. The second question is, what did House Republicans enter with cell phones illegally? The answer is the SCIF, or the Secure Compartment Information Facility. The third question is, which country saw a fare hike triggering protests over social inequality and rising costs of living? The answer is Chile. Cool. Let's go to the next event. It's Harvard and affirmative action. So for those of you juniors, you're going to be applying to college next year. And like 1 year from now, you're literally going to be submitting your applications like me, procrastinating. But in 2014, we saw a group called Students for Fair Admissions, who represented Asian Americans, filing a lawsuit against Harvard, basically saying that they were illegally discriminating against Asian applicants to allow more Black and Hispanic students in. And for the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of deliberation. It's been a real hot topic among the Asian American community. Some of them believe that we should be protecting minorities. Some believe that, it's racism to, let in more Black and Hispanic people, but not let in Asian people who have also been discriminated against. But most recently, the circuit judge this month ruled in favor of Harvard's admissions process. They said that there was no racial quota rebalancing, and they said that ensuring diversity relies on race-conscious admissions. And it's suspected that they're going to appeal the decision, which means that the Supreme Court, and right now that just went through a district court. Now it's going to go to an appeals court, and then a decision will be heard there. And then if Students for Fair Admissions or Harvard doesn't like that decision, they'll appeal to the Supreme Court. This decision also upholds the Supreme Court case Fisher versus University of Texas. A white female said because of her race that she couldn't get into UT Austin, and the Supreme Court ruled 4-3 that affirmative action was acceptable and it allowed for a diverse class. So there are some vast applications, racial justice and marginalization, and also just whether the college admission process is fair, because a lot of people believe that, if you're a certain race, or if you have relatives who went to a certain school, or if you just so happen to be fortunate to have more than $200,000 a year, in terms of family income, that you have an advantage in college admissions. You get to pay for more SAT tutoring, ACT tutoring, things like that. So an example prompt is write an essay stating your position on whether the college admissions process is fair today. So you could, I think an example thesis would be the college admissions process is not fair today due to the advantage of like socioeconomic class, in which having a higher financial income status could lead to getting into a better college. That's just an example thesis. Cool, we'll move on. There's also the whole issue with foreign policy in Syria. The Trump administration gave the green light to a Turkish operation that led to the invasion of Kurdish land. And there were basically 1,000 units in Syria that were protecting the Kurds from a Turkish invasion. And President Trump authorized them to get moved from Syria to Iraq and Saudi Arabia. And it was really problematic because Kurds were a key ally in the fight against ISIS. They even helped with the operation against al-Baghdadi, who is the leader of ISIS, who is now dead. The Kurds actually helped with the operation that killed him in the end. And so the Kurds, now that they don't have the US's support, because as you can see that bottom right picture, our tanks literally left their area. They had to flee to the dictator Bashar al-Assad of Syria, and they had to get into negotiations with Russia. And basically, we're seeing that Russia's filling in that power vacuum that the United States used to hold. Also, ISIS prisoners have escaped, and 160,000 Kurds are displaced. Because what happened was that when the U.S. was in that Kurdish Syria area, the Kurds were guarding the prisoners, who many of which were of the Islamic State. And now that Turkey invaded the Kurds went to the front lines to attack Turkey instead of protecting these prisoners. And as a result, we've seen that the Islamic State prisoners have now escaped. Also, there's been a permanent ceasefire that's supposedly implemented, but the Kurds basically have to move 20 miles away from their current border, because basically Turkey is afraid that certain Kurds, or all Kurds technically, are part of the PKK, or the Kurdistan's Worker Party, which has committed some attacks against Turkey because they haven't allowed sovereignty and things like that. Cool. So what's the application of Syrian Kurds, you might ask? It's basically supporting allies, whether the US should be a global policeman, and also things like isolationism and globalism. So an example prompt is write an essay arguing your position on whether isolation should be prioritized over cooperation. And if you were to write a body paragraph for the argument essay, an example is isolation should not be prioritized over cooperation as it hurts security. That's just an example. And you can see that materialize in Iraq, where prisoners have escaped that could pose a national security threat to the US. All right, the next event is union strikes. I think this is our last one. So there has been a lot of striking happening, and it's very similar, kind of similar to the protests that happened in South America. Over 49,000 General Motors workers had to go on strike because negotiations broke down over things like pay, healthcare, and job security. We saw that currently those General Motors workers who are part of the UAW union, or United Auto Workers, are making less than $300 a week. And if you divide that by 7, that's $40 a day, which is under their previous minimum wage is 4 hours, which is insane. And basically, General Motors has been negotiating with those workers. They want them to stay on their health insurance, and they're trying to pave a path for part-time workers to become full-time. Also, in Chicago, we've seen that over 25,000 Chicago teachers have gone out on the streets, left the schools. They're advocating for smaller class sizes to basically serve the city's homeless with better services. Even though the mayor has offered things like a big pay raise, he's offered concessions, and he's even basically said that the union's demands would cost them billions of dollars. That's basically the example in which the Chicago protesters are kind of at a stalemate, and right now there's not really any kind of negotiations happening between those two. And so yeah, in Chicago, we're seeing another example of, protests flaring and people wanting more rights, which is kind of a big part of American society anyways. All right, so The application of union strikes, you might asking. The first is like democracy and your voice. And in addition, it's like corporations, businesses, and organizations' failure to protect workers and give them rights. So an example thesis is write an essay arguing your position on whether the right to assembly leads to effective results. So I'll give you about 2 minutes if you're on a replay or if you are here in the audience. If you want to write a thesis, go for it. Be my guest. Leave it in the chat. Write a thesis that argues your position on whether the right to assembly leads to effective results. I just want to see if y'all are like, on the right track towards a thesis, and it's okay if it's not perfect. So yeah, I'll give you about 2 minutes. Okay, cool. So we'll end this stream with a quick quiz. This time it's multiple choice. So, which undergraduate college was being sued for their affirmative action policy? A is Harvard, B is Yale, C is Brown, and D is Stanford. So leave your letter in the chat. I'll give you about 15 seconds to think which undergraduate college was sued for affirmative action. I mentioned this a lot of times. Okay, the answer is A, Harvard. They were the ones who were being sued for affirmative action, right? The next question. Which country is currently working with Turkey to protect their land from the Kurds? So I didn't explicitly say this in my slide, but what I did say was that there was a country that has filled in the power vacuum from the US. So we have A, Saudi Arabia, B, Iran, C, Russia, and D, the United States. So right now, we saw US troops leave. So who has come in and they're working with Turkey to protect their land from the Kurds? Leave that letter answer in the chat, and we'll go through the answer in just a second. All right, the answer is C. The country that is working with Turkey right now to protect their land from the Kurds is Russia. They are trying their best to, fill in the power vacuum. They've been cooperating with current dictator Bashar al-Assad of Syria. And so, yeah, Russia is working with Turkey right now. Next slide. Oops. Which of the following groups is currently protesting? Toyota workers, Chicago teachers, McDonald's employees, or none of the above? Which of the groups is which we are currently protesting? Excuse me. I'll give you about 10 seconds. And don't be afraid to answer like wrong. It's no big deal. All right, the answer is B. Chicago teachers are the ones who are currently protesting. They're basically trying to advocate for higher wages. They're advocating for more services to help the Chicago homeless youth. And it's actually triggered a lot of outrage because, students like y'all who are AP students are currently not in classes. They're not learning curriculum from their teachers because teachers are on strike. And so they're not assigning homework, not doing tests, not doing quizzes. And even students, like there are certain juniors who haven't even taken the PSAT yet in Chicago because the strike started before they could even take the PSAT. And in addition, there are students who are waiting on letters of recommendation from teachers for college applications, and those teachers aren't doing any work right now. So many people for the early action deadline or early decision deadline haven't been able to, submit stuff like transcripts. Right, next question. Which of the following ways can you not use current events in AP Lang? A is support for the argument essay. B is context for the synthesis essay. C is quotes and rhetorical analysis. And D is the sophistication point, rebuttal/counter argument. I'll give you about 10 seconds again to leave your answer in the chat, and I'll let you know the right or wrong answer. And I see an answer from Candace here who says C. And that's exactly right. Quotes and rhetorical analysis. You absolutely cannot ever use current events for rhetorical analysis because, you're analyzing an article. But you can use current events and the support for your argument essay. You can use it as some contextualization for your synthesis essay. Like last year, we had one about wind turbines. So for instance, we could use an event from September like Greta Thunberg's speech about climate change and how we're not doing enough to stop it. That could be a contextualization for the synthesis prompt. And also, you can use it as part of the sophistication point because you can use it as a counter argument, a concession, or a rebuttal to some kind of common argument. All right. Last question. When is the next current events stream? A is there are no more streams for current events. B is every Sunday at 2 a.m. Eastern. C is every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific. And D is every Monday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern with AP Gov. So for those of you who didn't join me at the beginning of the stream, you may not know, but just think logically because you are very close, Candace. It is not B. I don't think I could ever host a stream at 1 a.m. Central every Sunday. The answer is D. It's every Monday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern in a collaboration with AP US Government. So this is the last AP language specific stream with just me. In the future, there will be two people, as you can see here in this box. There will be two people, one I think to the right of me actually, and we will be coordinating with AP US Government streamers every week. Actually, I think every other week I will be in a stream, but every week there will be a current event stream that's talking about elections and current events. So it will be a collaboration with AP US Government, and hopefully it should kind of bring together the live audiences of AP Lang and AP Government. It helps grow both subjects, and it really helps in terms of getting different perspectives on current events and current issues. All right, so this is the actual last question. Do you have any questions for me? That's anything. It could be AP English language questions. It could be questions about the exam. So I could answer questions about, rhetorical analysis, synthesis, and the argument essay. You can even ask me questions about Fiveable because, I streamed all summer from June through August. I believe we've had a bunch of new opportunities. For instance, we have SAT streaming now. We have, I think, 10 to 15 different AP subjects. All right, Stephen asks, how do I know the difference between the three essays? So I can actually show you because I requested it from College Board. So on the day of the AP exam, you get this pink packet, and it has all of your essays. So that first page is going to be, this is actually just the boxes and stuff. So this is where you'll write your essays. But in your booklet, you'll flip to the first page. It'll say rhetorical, or excuse me, your first essay, is Your first essay is synthesis. So let's say synthesis, it will say you will have to read 6 sources and they give you a prompt, right? So that's how you know it's the first essay. And then when you write your actual free response prompts, there is a box for you to write 1. And then you'll write your synthesis essay. And then your second essay is always rhetorical analysis. So you'll write 2. And as you can see here, there's a lot of rhetorical analysis. And then the third is argument. And also, all 3 are very, very different looking, I guess. The rhetorical analysis, the synthesis has, I think, A, B, C, D, E, 5 sources. So you have to read like 5 articles, annotate them, find a theme, and make an argument using those sources to support your argument. It's like a research paper. Rhetorical analysis is just one long article, speech, or address. You have to find rhetorical devices and show how those rhetorical devices contribute to the author's purpose. If you've tuned into any of our streams, Stephen, this month, we're actually talking about rhetorical analysis, that second essay on the AP exam. It's really, really easy once you get to know it and once you practice it. And then the last essay is argument. You get a prompt about some kind of issue. Last year, it was write about something that's overrated. It's very simple. And you just kind of come up with your own evidence that you use evidence to support your own thesis about that argument. I hope that answers your question. And if anyone else has any questions, I'll leave about 2 minutes for questions, and then I will end this stream. Okay, cool. Thank you all so much for coming to my stream today. I really appreciate it. And you will be able to watch that stream on November 4th for rhetorical analysis body paragraphs. November 5th is conclusions with me. I believe there's a Kahoot happening the week afterwards. And also, don't forget, every single Monday at 8:30 Eastern, we'll be having current event streams. It's also going to show up on app.5able.me. It will show up on both the AP Lang and AP Gov pages, so you can watch our streams with either subject. And I'm so excited to see y'all there on Monday, but also at any of our AP English language streams. Thanks for coming, y'all. See ya.